Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to episode 6 of CRE Chat Live. We are here with our guest host, Jill Rasmussen of Davis Group, and she was our guest host on our September topic, which covered healthcare real estate and commercial real estate. Jill, thank you for joining us today. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what it is that you do and your expertise in healthcare real estate?
Yeah, so I'm Jill Rasmussen. I'm a principal of Davis. I have 2 partners, and for the past 35 years or so, we have provided full service real estate services to the healthcare industry. So we provide strategy planning, brokerage, development, investment, and we help healthcare systems and independent clinics with their commercial real estate strategy and expansion opportunities.
And quickly, before we jump into the question, I wanted to ask you, Jill, how did you get into healthcare real estate? Kind of what was your path into this type of commercial real estate?
Right. Well, I started a long time ago and did a lot of office brokerage in the commercial real estate side. I started right out of college, so didn't have experience in any other industry or anything else other than commercial real estate. And so a group that I worked with for a while owned a medical office building that I worked on kind of a strategy to renovate the building, expand the tenants, and it was all clinics. And the interesting part for me is those groups really needed a lot of advice and support to figure out their real estate strategy. There's so many unique nuances with healthcare that I felt I was able to provide really good value to those groups, and then really focused in on it. And I think as the market changed over time, really becoming an expert in that area and a niche, and really providing service. So it was kind of one I felt was the most interesting kind of industry within commercial real estate.
Yeah, and there's a lot kind of a broad definition of healthcare real estate, and I think everybody in every market might have a little bit of a different opinion based on the deals that are working and where. So our first question of CRE chat that we asked on our Twitter chat was define healthcare real estate and what makes it different from the traditional commercial real estate that a lot of us are used to.
Right. I think so. We look at our market as on-campus real estate and off-campus real estate. And that means either a separate medical office building is attached to a hospital, so it has tunnel access, or just physically attached. So there's a lot of surgeons in that space that are doing procedures at a hospital. So anything on or near a hospital campus is on campus, and off campus is a freestanding medical office building to kind of serve the patients in a neighborhood, as an example. And that might be a full service multi-tenant building. It might be an ambulatory surgery center. Anything that's more in the neighborhoods is off campus. And so it doesn't include lab. It doesn't include office space for larger, like United Health Group, as an example, has a lot of space, but it's really office and administrative space. So we track just true clinic space that is used by clinics that see patients. So that's kind of in our market, that's our universe, and it's pretty standard across the country.
So do you find that most of the brokers that work in that space, are they mostly, is that what they focus on as healthcare, or do you work with a broad range of brokers that, maybe you work with office brokers who happen to help a medical client? And what's the difference?
Right. So it depends on the market size. If there's not enough medical space that you can actually specialize in it and make a living because there aren't enough deals that happen. So it's really market driven. You see a lot of office brokers, you see a lot of retail brokers that might work on a medical transaction here and there, but they don't specialize in it 100% unless the market is big enough. Our market's about 6.5 million square feet. So that's pretty small compared to some bigger markets, but because we are full service, we do the strategy planning, we do investment development, leasing, brokerage, everything. We can specialize in it, but if a market's too small, you tend to have to do some other product type just to get enough deals done annually.
And so, yeah, it is a really specialized type of real estate. So if you are, say, an office broker or an office landlord who, I know some of these buildings that are, what you call off campus, some of them have traditional office space in them, and then they happen to have medical tenants in them. They're not, sometimes in a market you'll find an office building that seems to attract a lot of medical tenants to it, but it may not be specifically an MOB or medical office building. So,
right. And that's really because there isn't anything better available. It's really challenging for medical clinics to lease space in traditional retail or strip centers. They do it because the facilities are located in the right spot. Those retailers did a demographic study. They found the right prime space. They built a building, and then they, went under, like Blockbuster and, Video Update and Borders Books. And so you have all these great retail sites that have a lot of parking. And so medical kind of comes along and says, well, this is a great location. Let's see if we can retrofit this and make it work. But you do run into issues just the way retail deals are structured. Retail generally, you see a lot of turn and shorter lease terms. Well, clinics need long-term leases and high tenant improvement allowances and low rental structures, and they're not selling stuff generally. So they only can generate so much revenue. So you're paying high net rates, and it's a little bit difficult. So I think if there's the only opportunity in a market is to co-locate with a bank or a law firm or whatever it might be, that might be the best opportunity. That new buildings, it's very expensive. The build outs are expensive. They don't like to move around if they don't have to. And so they're trying to find that right fit. And it's just so happened over time that old malls or old strip centers or old buildings have been kind of a unique opportunity for healthcare uses, but they're certainly not ideal. Big box, junior boxes and big box, the spaces, it's so big, doesn't have a lot of window space, sometimes has a lot of warehouse. So, you're trying to retrofit that, but if it's the prime location, you work with what you work with. But I think there's so many nuances with how the leases have to be structured and what the rent deals need to be and how to help the actual clinics through a lot of these processes, and their decision making is pretty unique. So I think it'd be hard to just do, one every few years and really know, what it would look like. But again, it's market driven. Depends on how sophisticated the market is from a healthcare standpoint and what kind of real estate, they've moved to over time for hospital systems and for independent clinics.
And, that's a topic that came up pretty often in our CRE chat, was kind of a shift, maybe more of a shift into retail centers and the big box and what you were saying, which kind of brings us to our second question, which was name some factors affecting demand for healthcare real estate. So a lot of the answers were the aging population. And Jill, you can speak more on the other factors as well, but kind of the more aging population and going out to your patients so they have better access to you, which I think kind of feeds back into going into the retail centers that you were just speaking of.
Right. I think, reform has had a pretty big impact on hospital systems and clinics. And so the way that physicians and systems are getting reimbursed today is patient experience. And so it's value-based pay. And so that patient experience is key. And so if you have to drive to a big hospital campus and find parking and walk around and find the medical building and find the right clinic, it's not close to home, it's inconvenient. So all of those kind of services that maybe used to be in a hospital setting that can be done off campus now to save money and provide that care at a more cost-effective price point, you're seeing them building, nicer facilities, a more comfortable environment, good parking, great signage, easy access, all the retail type components you would look at. And also when you're bringing your kids to the clinic, you've got the ability to stop at the pharmacy, the grocery store, the whatever else it is that's kind of in your consumer path, and it's close to home. And so you're seeing a whole different shift of the real estate so that these groups can deliver their care in a more convenient manner, but also make it cost effective, because they're getting reimbursed less and they're still having to provide the same service. And so they're trying to figure out how to, remain somewhat profitable, and also still provide all the services that their patients are demanding and needing today.
That makes a lot of sense. And there were a few things you brought up. I was making mental notes, but one thing you really kind of touched on that I can speak from experience. I have 2 kids. They're both young. And when you have young kids, obviously you have a lot of like sickness that runs through the house, and typically they both get it. And as a mom and as a working mom, I need to be able to, obviously I have to be able to get an appointment with the doctor. I want it to be convenient either to work or home or to school. I have to probably go pick the kids up, take them to the doctor's office. And then obviously, 9 times out of 10, there's a prescription written. So
Right.
I want to be able to, with my kids after the doctor's office, be able to go, they'll call it in, I can pick it up and then head home. But that convenience factor, I've seen a lot of pediatricians' offices have multiple locations. Like that
Right.
drives, I know the pediatrician's office that when we lived in Memphis that we went to, I think they had like 4 or 5 locations, and I could go to any of them depending on, where I was or what I needed. But my main doctor was at one location usually. So I guess some of those types of doctors, maybe internal medicine and pediatricians, seems like they would need multiple locations to provide better service to their patients, correct?
Right, exactly. And they're trying to be open longer, later at night, now open on weekends. You didn't used to see that. You'd see kind of just regular clinic hours. And then just a better experience. And whether that's you're coming in, for an appointment, sometimes there's, a nervousness around that. There's just a discomfort, and there used to be just the basic, clinic type space that was just very generic and not inviting and not a really good environment. And so what we've been doing over the years is really working with the hospital systems and the clinics to create, what location do they need to be in? How do they need to expand? And then what is that building going to look like, and what's it going to do? Can we get a full service, one-stop shop facility that has a surgery center and a pharmacy and imaging and primary care and specialty care, and has everything? And it's got, orthopedic and PT and everything right there. So it's kind of it's the bigger multi-tenant building that you used to see sitting on a hospital campus, and now that's, right in your neighborhood. And so we're seeing that trend, and we're seeing it with the larger independent specialty practice groups like orthopedic, eye, neurology, wanting to build a facility that has everything from, the patient comes in and they have that consultation. If they need surgery, they can do it outpatient, they can rehab, and they want the patient from, beginning to end without having to refer to other physician groups. And so you're seeing the real estate really help support that effort. And that might be, again, a retrofit if there's space available. That's usually, most of the time, not necessarily more cost effective than new construction, because what we do is we'll work with them to figure out their floor plan, and then we'll build a building around it. And so, everybody wants first floor. So you're not seeing, high-rise medical buildings anymore. It's just too hard to get in the elevator and go up. I mean, so you're seeing this trend to what's their model of care, how do they want to function in the space, and then build the walls around it. And to be able to put the right ceiling height in and put gurney size elevators in and have massive signage and massive parking. All those things are just crucial today. And sometimes you can't find that product in a market that exists in prime sites, so a lot of times you're retrofitting, but for us it's been easier to build new, and it's been more cost effective. So, and you can handle expansion and, you know, different needs within the facility.
Okay, so one more question along that lines. So you're saying it's easier to build new. Do these larger practice groups, is it easier for them to own their building? So it's an owner occupied, or is it easier for them to lease?
It depends. I would say generally the bigger systems don't want to put a lot of money into bricks and mortar real estate. They have so many other things to spend money on, like labor, IT, you know, all that. So they generally, unless it's a core building attached to a hospital, they generally want to lease long term. The bigger independent clinics have been leaning more towards owning because they see that piece of real estate as a brand and a marketing tool so that they can have giant signage and understand maybe the benefits of owning. The issue is you're trying to make that right decision of you don't want to have an obsolete building that the practice leaves and then you're trying to sell it empty. So when we analyze, you know, just that lease versus buy, it really depends on the system, the clinic, what they're trying to accomplish with it. And if it's a new market, do they want to just test it out and have an option to buy that building? So there's a lot of kind of how does the real estate work with their, you know, business strategy and what's going to make the most sense. We've seen a lot of medium and smaller independent practice groups want ownership. The physicians want to have some control. Some don't because they want flexibility to grow, especially if they're going to get acquired. I mean, there's massive consolidation going on right now with the systems and the independent clinics nationally. So, you know, what does healthcare look like in the next 15 to 20 years? You know, everybody's nervous. It's just not sustainable. It's too expensive. So they're trying to figure out, you know, do we have an asset that, you know, we've got some cash flow and we can sell that at the end, but you need lease term and
I like the point that you brought up about what is healthcare going to look like in 10 to 15 years. And I think we're going to come back to that question in just a minute. I do want to jump to question 3 real quick that we asked. How does the demand for healthcare real estate affect retail, office, and industrial properties?
Well, we talked a little bit about kind of the retail and office. If there really isn't anything better or there's some good office, kind of office condo type product, I guess I would name it, with some good visibility and access, some of that stuff works well because it's in a good location. So I know we've seen good retail transformation. We've seen office buildings retrofitted to clinic, but you really need good infrastructure. It's nice to have higher ceilings. A lot of the buildings built, you know, years ago, the ceiling height isn't there, the windows aren't big enough, there's not a gurney size elevator, there's not handicap accessibility, there's not enough parking. So I think office and retail, there's obviously been an impact over time. Industrial, I would say for me, the only thing really is kind of office tech space maybe that has been retrofit to a surgery center or something, and it was in the right location and it was cost effective and it made sense. But we don't necessarily get into too much on, you know, supply chain and distribution, that, you know, I think for medical device and product and things like that, but, you know, that's always been the case. And I don't know that there's more of that going on right now. So we aren't seeing, you know, the zoning isn't right in industrial for clinic use and stuff. So we don't touch on that much at all. So I'd probably say almost you get better information on from, you know, anybody really working on supply chain, and is it medical device and shipping, you know, product and supplies and pharmaceuticals and things like that.
Yeah, and I would say I can speak a little bit to that, being an industrial, and that's mainly what I do, is we have noticed that medical industrial users, like a Cardinal Health per se, they tend to control their own supply chain, and they kind of serve as their own, I guess, 3PL, which is contradictory. Obviously, a 3PL is a third-party logistics provider. So they tend to do their own, you know, I know Ben and I, when we went to Atlanta a few weeks ago, noticed that most of the medical users were controlling their own industrial space. They weren't using a 3PL. So they kind of do everything from warehousing to transportation, because a lot of the supply chain is really critical. And, they probably are supplying like blood products or
Right.
some pharmaceuticals and things that probably have to be in a controlled environment, that it's so important to control that environment. They can't leave that up to a third party to do. So,
Right.
on that front, I would say that they're probably, a lot of them are leasing their own industrial space and managing that process themselves. But I do think, back to your, again, Casey said a lot of people mentioned retail, and Damian Davila, he said basically retail space is the next frontier. Former big box spaces, which you brought up, Jill, are being chopped up and repurposed for stable long-term medical office users, because he said, they have great credit. They're great tenants. That being said, it seems like the landlords who are used to more of a retail lease are going to have to transition, maybe either, sounds like the rates, and also they may be spending more upfront in TI or tenant improvement dollars to attract those retail users. But it makes sense that a retail space has, obviously they have heavier parking, which is needed.
Right.
And these retail buildings tend to be in areas close to pharmacies, close to other amenities.
Right.
So it sounds like retail is a good option, especially since maybe some of these centers are being vacated due to the rise in e-commerce.
Right. Yeah. And I think there's, because they're so well located, we've done hundreds of deals in anything from, an old country buffet to Borders Books to Gander Mountain to, it's like, well, it's in the right spot, so, and it's one level. So you're not going to see, usually 2-story retail. So at least the single story is workable. The parking's workable. There's always good signage allowed. So that works. It's just how was it built, and are we having to deal with a 35-foot or 30-foot ceiling where you got, a bunch of exam rooms. And so there are just some things that, need to be retrofit, but it's nice to see some of that stuff being repurposed. And I like the combination of like mall and shopping with retail, with medical, because it's just that, you're already going there for whatever you're doing, and to have that as part of it, I think it's a good mix. And historically, retail didn't like clinic because they didn't want to have a dialysis center next to your higher end clothing store or something. And so now there's a better mix because the clinics have changed their look. They're nicer and they're expensive to build. It can be anywhere from $90 to $100 to $150 to $200 a foot to build out a clinic space. And so you want to see long-term, and once they're in there, generally, as you mentioned, you've got a good credit tenant. They've been around for 50 years providing healthcare service. They pay their rent on time, and they don't necessarily want to move. And so they've become a desired tenant, and which has also then pushed the investment market to make it very active, and the lowest cap rates we've seen in history. So whether they're in a retail building or office, as long as it's all clinic, not office and clinic, we're seeing a lot of demand for that type of real estate from an investment standpoint.
Angel, you just answered our question number 4, a lot of it, which was
running ahead.
What are the top 5 trends in healthcare real estate, which I think you covered a lot of. Coy Davidson said shifting care to outpatient settings. Liz Berthollet said the consolidation among networks. And so we just had a lot of, there's a lot of trends, I think, and it's probably shifting one way or another or both ways. So it's a really interesting sector, I think, that not all of us really know about. But question 5 is, what is the effect of each generation on healthcare real estate?
Yeah, I think, the 2 big things, I think the thing that's really going to keep healthcare real estate, being very active is we've got a huge aging demographic, and just the studies of, how many Americans turn age 65 every year and are going to need more care going forward. And as they become less mobile, that care needs to be closer to them. And so I think we're even going to start to almost go backwards a bit, where you've got in-home care, where the home now is the next hospital. The telemedicine, where you don't want to bring your little kids in every single time when they have an earache or an ear infection. How can we monitor what's happening digitally and have those conversations, video, phone, get that prescription, so you're not having to get to the doctor every single time. And so I think you're going to start to see some of those things, technology starting to come into play even more, and then getting those facilities closer and trying to put together more. I'm starting to finally see this in other markets, where you'd have everything from senior living to memory care to clinic to each level, so that you're not seeing all this moving around and trying to get from one place to the other. So it's more of a community that has all of these services and medical clinic and surgery and so on. So I think that the baby boomer generation is going to need a lot of service and close. And then on the flip side, I think, the millennials are looking for convenient care immediately, and they want to know exactly what the price is. We've never known what it costs to go to the doctor, and I still think we probably don't. And so where is that care going to happen? They're probably not committed to a primary care doctor. They'd probably change doctors if it was closer, or we're providing a specific service that you need. So I think you're going to see a lot of, again, consumer kind of demand on the millennial side. And that's why you're seeing clinics like pop up at, CVS and Walmart. And we've got Target headquarters here in Minneapolis. Well, they've got, a wellness center within the facility. And so just that whole kind of convenience of that type of healthcare and wellness and support, I think will really be a push.
And that's
Dee Dee on the chat, she said just that. Yeah, she's a millennial, and she said convenience number one. And of course, I'm the Gen Xer who says, I just want to know what things cost. And it's funny, after our chat, I don't know if any of you are CBS Morning News watchers, but they've had a series on the hidden cost of healthcare and how people have gone maybe to the doctor or to the ER and had something done. And just, I think they've been showing the difference between how much things can cost on your insurance versus somebody else's insurance versus someone who doesn't have it. I mean, the price range is within the double digit, like $20,000 difference between someone paid $500 for something for like a blood test versus somebody paying $10,000. So yeah, a cost for me are just, when you go somewhere, you can't typically, like when you go to a restaurant, you have a menu and you pay after the meal, right? You know exactly what things are going to cost. But when you go to the doctor, you get services done. They say and sometimes they say you have to have the service done. You get it done, but you have no idea until after, maybe a month later, when your insurance bill comes in, how much it actually costs you. So that's transparency and cost is a big deal.
Right. Yeah. And not know, I mean, it's, you're always concerned and with your health. And if there is a critical issue, you want to make sure you're getting the right, the right recommendations and doing the right things. And it's really hard, I think, to just be just focused on, things you don't know. I mean, I think it is the only industry where you go, I'm going to go get that done. And I have if I went to this group, it would be different. And that's just, the location of it being on a campus or off or in a hospital or outside of the hospital. There's a big range. And so, they're obviously, that's one of their big agendas is, trying to get pricing out there and some transparency in that. And I think that's going to be challenging.
Well, that about finishes up our CRE chat. I think we have 1 minute left before we might get cut off. So Jill, if you want to say any last minute words and let us know how the chat was and where we can find you.
Yes, actually, we're headquartered in Minneapolis. I'm on Twitter at Jill K. Rass, from my chat now. And we're at Davis HRE, so davishealthcarerealestate.com. All of our information is on there. And we've actually got 5 offices, so we work in other markets as well, and really like to help healthcare systems and clinics and other brokers in the market. If they've got clients and they haven't gone through the process, we like to help them. Obviously, I use my SIOR network and try to help brokers in other markets if they want to get into healthcare. It's obviously going to be a very stable asset class going forward, and it's kind of nice to be that expert and, have that unique niche, for younger brokers starting out, and hope to do lots more deals.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much for tuning into our Siri Chat Live podcast. Make sure to keep an eye out for October's chat and